Okay, so here we have the kit from Express Models, specifically for the Class 91. So if I pop open the packet and take out what we've got, you can see that what you get in one of these kits is quite a nice little custom-made circuit board in the middle. Coming down to the middle is this bundle of multicoloured wires. So each of those strands corresponds to the colour on the DCC chip. We've got a white, a green, a blue, a purple and a yellow, bringing all the different power sources in. And then off each end of the circuit board, the wires lead off to these little LED bundles. So each one is a red and white LED stuck together the correct distance apart for this particular locomotive. They've got a shaft along there that's long enough to actually stick through the body, so that they'll just appear at the right length on the outside. And then obviously you've got this black block at the back here that makes it a little bit easier to fix them in place. And everything goes back to the centre. So the kit itself makes it really easy to be able to stick it all together. You don't have to get worried about which wire goes off where, because all that work's been done for you. All you need to do is actually stick these into the right places on the locomotive. To help you understand how to do that, the kits also come with some fairly comprehensive instructions that guide you through the whole process. So on one side there, we've got full details of what to do in terms of drilling the holes. So it tells us that we need to have them 2.5mm apart, that we need to start off by using a small drill. It suggests a 0.8mm drill to make a small pilot hole, which then makes it easier to drill the main hole, which over here it then says needs a 2mm drill. So it guides you through everything that you need, exactly where to do it, and on the back it then takes you through the wiring that they've done onto that circuit board, and so tells you about the different colours and which one deals with which. And this kit is suitable for 4 and 2 function decoders, or obviously if it's got more functions than that, it's even better. But if you've got a 4 function decoder, then you're able to wire it in such a way that you can control the front and rear cab separately, or sorry, the front and rear lighting separately, so that when it's in formation with some coaches behind it, you don't have to have the tail lights on, which obviously wouldn't be realistic in that sense. If you've got a 2 function decoder, it tells you how to twist some of the wires together so that you can still wire it in place, but it just means that the tail and headlights will be on in conjunction. So having had a good read of those instructions to make sure I understand exactly what I need to do, the first job is to pop out the little plastic section at the front here, where at the moment the lights are simply painted on. So on the inside there's some little plastic pegs that are the rear end of that plastic beam, and if you just push those pegs from behind, that entire front section comes away. I'll do the same on the rear. And that section's removed as well. And the only reason they want us to remove those is so that I can now put some glue behind them and stick them back into place permanently. Because what we're going to do after that is then be drilling some holes straight through these plastic bars where those lights are currently painted on. And doing so, if I turn it over that way, you can probably just see that the peg that held it in place lines up perfectly with where those holes are going to be. And so if we start drilling through, it's going to stop that peg from being able to hold it in place. So we're going to glue them back in, so that they're permanently in place, and just chop off the excess at the rear. Okay, so I've now glued the strips back into place, and on the inside I've used our track cutters to just cut off the bits of the pegs that protruded through, and then I've used a small modelling file, just to file them down as far as I can so they're completely out of the way. The next step is then to drill some small pilot holes into where the lights are currently painted into position. Now they recommend that you use a small drill to be able to make that pilot hole, because then it makes drilling the main hole a little bit easier and stops the chance of your drill just slipping and causing damage to your model. So I'm going to use a fine 0.8mm drill bit there that I've put into a small pin vise so that I can obviously twist through the plastic. And I'm going to make a start with the headlight on that side there. Okay, so I very carefully line up that drill in the middle of the headlight, and then just start to slowly twist. Now the most important thing is obviously that the hole is in exactly the right place and that we don't start slipping all over. So I'm not rushing, I'm just turning it slowly at first to try and make an indentation. Before I start to pick up the speed and push it through. I'm also trying to make sure that I keep the drill bit perpendicular to the body, so that it's at exactly 90 degrees, so that when I come to try and put the LED in through the hole, it's pointing straight out and isn't twisted. Okay, this might take me a few minutes, so I'll see you when it's done. And there we have it. Don't know whether you can actually see, if it will focus, but there's now a very tiny hole right through the middle, and I did both of them while I was off camera. So there's a tiny hole straight through both of those main headlights. Now we need to drill the hole for the red lights at the side. Now the most important thing with this is obviously that once the holes are drilled, these blocks with the two LED shafts are going to have to be pushed through those holes and be the right distance apart. If they're a little bit too wide or a little bit too narrow, then it'll make fitting these much more difficult. Now in the instructions it says that the holes need to be at 2.5mm from centre to centre, but when I checked that out with my ruler and just measured up from the centre of one to the centre of the other, it's not quite 2.5, it's just a little bit under. And obviously when you're drilling holes in the outside of your model, you only really get one shot at it before you've ruined the whole thing. So I didn't want to take the risk of measuring it exactly according to the instructions and then them being a little bit too far apart. So what I've done is I've taken a spare piece of plastic, so this is just an offcut from something else, and I've actually made some practice holes in there. And so using the same drills and the same techniques, I measured it out using the LED blocks on my ruler to kind of gauge the best distance, and then drilled 2 holes. And what you can see is that those, if I try and push the LED block through, there you go. So those are exactly the right distance apart for those LEDs to go through without being squashed. So what I'm going to do now that I'm happy with that distance is I'm actually going to use this piece of plastic as a template over the top of my model. So I can line up, now unfortunately I can't do this by eye and show you on camera at the same time really, but I'm going to line up the centre of the hole over the hole that I've made through the headlight, and then use the other hole to guide where I'm going to do my second pilot hole. So drill through the centre of that one there. Okay, and there you can just about see the pilot holes I've drilled for the red lights there. Now you can see how on the original model where the paint's been applied isn't properly lined up and accurate on both sides. One of them's a little raised up, and that the holes don't actually line up perfectly with what was painted there before, so it is important that you measure rather than just go off what was already on the model. So with those those 4 pilot holes drilled, the next step is to then widen them out into the full 2mm hole that's needed for the LED. So if I grab my other drill, okay, so there you can see the pilot holes I've now drilled for the red lights. You can see that the original paintwork behind wasn't actually applied incredibly accurately, particularly on this side here. So it's absolutely important that you always measure the holes rather than trying to go off the original livery application. But with those 2 there and the 2 outer ones drilled, I can now widen them out ready for the LEDs. So I'm going to now use my other drill bit here, which I've put into a different pin vise just to stop me having to waste time swapping drill bits over. But I've got a wider 2mm drill that I can use to make the full size hole. So using the pilot, you can then line the drill up on that and it'll stop it slipping around, so you can make sure the hole is in the right place. But again, it's absolutely important that you make sure that the hole is perpendicular, there you go, at 90 degrees to the front of the locomotive, and is at 90 degrees so it's level that way, so the LED shaft can go through straight without being twisted. So starting with that first headlight, again I'm only turning slowly. You can now see that larger hole has completely removed the white paint from before, or the silver paint from before. I just need to do the one next to it. So again, using that pilot hole to line up, and then turning slowly. So I'm now going to repeat that for the 2 lights on that side, and then I'll do the whole thing again for all 4 lights on the rear, and then we'll have a look at fitting the LEDs. So if I show you the front now, you can see 4 holes at the front and 4 holes at the rear. So now we need to actually fit the LED blocks into the appropriate sets of holes. Now, the way that the whole chip and the harness and everything is wired up, one side is slightly shorter than the other, because the instructions that came with it explain the circuit board is designed to fit at the rear end just underneath where the pantograph is. So if I just check against the cutting mat, that side, yeah, it's about 2 centimetres or so shorter than the other direction. You can also tell which way it's supposed to go which because of the contacts in the middle. The yellow wire into the centre needs to go to the rear, and the white wire into the centre needs to go off to the front. So it needs to go in that way round, and then these blocks need to push in through those holes. It says to fix the LEDs in place with a small amount of glue, super glue, which I am going to do, but I think it's important to push in the lights a little bit first, so making sure they're the right way round, with the red on the inside and white on the outside, and push them in just a little bit first into those holes, because if I put glue on first and then try to push them through, there's a very good chance that I'd end up getting a little bit of glue on the end of the LED, and that would end up making the lens look a little bit funny or blurry, or just not the finish that I'm after. So I've pushed them in a little way, and then using a cocktail stick, I'm just going to dip it in a little bit of super glue, and then I can apply that around the outside. So because I'm doing it a small drop at a time, it'll take a few applications back and two. So a little bit of a tight squeeze, but obviously that's better than it being too loose. Now when I've pushed them all the way through, they're actually protruding. I don't know whether you'll be able to see that. They're actually protruding a small amount from the outside, so I'm going to push them back a little, just with the flat side of my screwdriver. Should be okay. Now because I have pushed them back a little bit, obviously some of the glue isn't going to be making perfect contact with the inside of the body, but because I applied it around the sort of LED shaft after I pushed it through, then that will be making contact around the outside. So for what pressure that's going to be under, that glue should hold that in place now quite nicely. So I'll do the same on the other side. And as if by magic, there you go. All 4 sets of LEDs inserted into the appropriate holes. I'm not going to deny that it was quite fiddly in places, and that part of the light beam that we stuck down before here at the back did actually break away in trying to push it through, because the plastic was just so thin around those holes. So I've had to then glue that back in with just an extra dab of super glue and push that edge back in. But once the whole unit's reassembled, you can't really tell too much that the finish isn't too bad. So I'm quite happy with that. The next job is wiring in the cab lighting that we fitted before into this circuit so that it lights up at the same time. On some models, the ones that you can buy with lighting pre-fitted, it's possible to switch the cab lighting on and off independently on a different function on the chip. But because this particular setup is going to make use of all the spare 4 functions that we have on our chip at the moment, so that we can control the head and tail lights completely independently, I've got nothing left over for the cab light. So what I'm going to do is wire the cab lighting into the same circuit as the headlights, so that when you switch the headlights on in the forward direction, then the cab light at the front will also come on, and when you switch the headlights on in the reverse direction, the rear cab will also come on. So not quite as flexible as perhaps we'd like it, but generally if you were driving it in that direction, then I suppose you would assume the driver would be at that end maybe, and it will make sense and it will look fairly good. So what I'm going to do is actually wire my cab lighting straight onto the copper pads onto this circuit board. The way that they've created it, there's actually some spare copper either side that gives me plenty of space to attach those wires. Okay, so with the cab lighting soldered onto the circuit board there, all that remains now is to attach it up to the DCC chip in the chassis that we completed before. So you just need to match up the coloured wires. They're all identical, so we've got a purple to purple, blue to blue and so on. I've stripped the ends and I'm just twisting them together like that. I'll solder the joints and cover them in a little bit of insulation tape so that that is all complete. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so amid this mass of little white insulation flags that I seem to have created, every single wire is now attached up and connected via that circuit board to all the lighting. So all I need to do now is stick that circuit board in place. So it's got a sticky pad on the back, and those wires are just the right length to allow it to fit there. So just next to the copper strip that was for the pantograph switch, it sticks neatly at the back, and then obviously when we reassemble it, all of these wires will be carefully put back into place. But we'll have a look at reassembling her and making her look a little bit more tidy in the next part. All that remains for now is to check that these lights work. So if I bring in our rolling road, it's got the DCC controller attached to it, and place her onto the track. Okay, so I've brought in the rolling road that's attached to the DCC controller and placed her onto the track. If I give her a little bit of juice to the motor, then the motor turns as it did before. But now, if I show you the front there and switch on the function, the headlights appear, and in the lighting now it's perhaps a little bit hard to see, but the cab light has come on as well, and at the back there's currently nothing. But if I switch direction, then the headlights come on at the back, and so does the cab light. If I turn on function 1, then we get the rear lights at the back there, and flip around again. Function 2 controls the rear lights there. So all the lights are working perfectly. Next step is to reassemble her.